Okay, welcome back, everyone. Our next set of speakers will challenge you to blaze your own path, to establish your own effective method to a stated goal. First, we'd like to welcome someone with a new take on the business world. As the executive director of Village Capital, a firm that evaluates seed stage projects, he successfully implemented the idea of peer selection into venture capitalism. He also serves as an investment analyst with First Light Ventures, where he has helped build a 20 enterprise portfolio over the past 3 years and has worked with the Indian school finance company in India. It is my pleasure to introduce UVA alum and businessman Ross Baird.
Hi, everybody. How you doing? Great. So Benjamin Franklin, at the end of the Constitutional Convention, as they were debating whether this structure was going to work to build a country, pointed to a painting on the back of Independence Hall in Philadelphia. I don't know if you've ever been there, but at the back of the chair of George Washington, who was chairing the Constitutional Convention, there was a big sun that looked kind of like this. And Ben Franklin, it was a really tough time in America. The country was in financial ruin. The government was not working at all, which is why they came up with this whole document process strategy to make the country work. People were worried about everything going on abroad, and morale was pretty low. And Benjamin Franklin says, you know, I've been looking at this sun on the back of the chair. It was a painting of a sun, and you couldn't tell if it was setting or rising. And he says, I've been wondering, is this a rising sun or a setting sun? And he says, there are a lot of reasons to think this is a setting sun. We wouldn't be here if it weren't. And I think that we're in a very similar position today, where there are a lot of problems. It's been a terrible week in the news. Things that we see all over the world we're really, really worried about. But Benjamin Franklin says, I look at this structure, and I really think it's a rising sun. I think we've come up with a way that we can get around some of the things that haven't been working. So I don't think that there are a lot of things in the newspaper this week that give us a lot of hope about the future, but I want to talk through some of the reasons why I think today we're getting stuck very similarly with the big challenges in the world, and how one process innovation that I've been working with, this idea of peer selection, is one of the ways that we can fix it. So, like I said, there are a lot of problems here in the world. We have never been richer as a society globally, yet there are still several billion people who live in abject poverty and pick through trash and slums just to make a subsistence wage. Here in America, the gap between rich and poor has never been greater. Our schools are not working for people who don't have resources. Globally, we have an economy that's based on resource extraction. We pull what we can out of the world, package it, and sell it. And that gives us things like this right here. This big red lake is actually bauxite, a toxic mineral. It's a byprocess of the development of aluminum, and a lot of how our carbon-based fuel economy goes leaves us acres and acres of toxic oil and what should be good natural resources. And then in our cities, the way that our cities, the way that our companies, the way that our economy is structured, we have this, which is noon in Beijing. This is a picture that I took in Beijing last fall from a skyscraper. It's noon on a perfectly clear day, but based off the pollution, it doesn't look very clear, does it? So that's the bad news. The good news is that we can solve them. There are people around the world who are incredible. You heard from some of them today, who are working on ideas that can address these seemingly unsolvable problems. This is a customer of a company that we've worked with called Simpa Networks that addresses urban poverty by providing access to energy to people in slum areas. They sell you a solar home device. You put a solar panel on your roof, and all of a sudden you have lights so your kids can study. You have energy so that you can work at night. And they make it affordable through a little chip that they've invented that goes into your cell phone. 900 million Indians have cell phones. And just like you pay per text message, you can pay per hour of energy by Simpa. You send a text message to the company, and it turns on your company. This is Jen Medberry, who's a Teach for America alum, software programmer. She started a company called Kickboard, which is a data analytics company for schools. And it's It's in 25,000 classrooms across the country, some of the poorest classrooms, and it's really making education better. There's the company CleanNG, which is maybe not the sexiest solution, but it's a natural gas canister that gets around why trucks that are currently using lots and lots of diesel, they could convert to clean natural gas. And fuel storage is a problem that is huge in the trucking industry that we wouldn't know here. This natural gas canister enables trucks, the 18-wheelers you see on the truck every day, to convert to clean natural gas. And this is an employee of SaveAMob who, if you pay a small monthly subscription and live in rural India, you can get a doctor coming to your village once a week doing just basic health diagnostic stuff. It's not, life-saving surgery, but it can tell you whether your kid has tuberculosis or malaria, and that'll save your kid's life. So we have these innovators all over the world. We think we know what the problems are. The good news is we have methods to solve them, but we're not. We look at these guys. How many of you look at these guys and feel confidence that they are going to solve the problems that we talked about? Any takers? So what's going on? We think and by we I mean not you and me, the people in charge of things, think that they've solved this idea of risk, saying we have analyzed the problems in the world, we've put the smartest minds in the world on them, we've come up with these financial methods that can solve the economy, solve poverty. We have unparalleled prosperity. These are two of our great minds from the early 21st century, Alan Greenspan, chair of the Federal Reserve, and Gordon Brown, who, as Chancellor of the Exchequer, ran the British economy. Alan Greenspan said that we were entering an unparalleled era of global prosperity because of the boom that was happening in the early 2000s. Gordon Brown says we figured out the banking system. This idea of boom and bust is no longer over. And then this is what happens in 2008. This idea that experts can solve everything sounds great, but when we have people who say, just to take this example, we've solved the economy, they end up building these complicated financial engineering systems that are not actually buying and selling products that we know. And then we have the stock market crash of 2008, which sends the economy in the worst tailspin, certainly in any of our lifetimes. Turns out we don't. This idea of risk is what really holds us back. People are willing to bet billions and billions of dollars on complicated financial structures invented by experts. But these companies, these four companies that I told you about that have very simple solutions to problems, for the past 3 years, they've been trying to raise $50,000, $100,000. And everyone says, oh, that's too risky. So why is it that we're willing to bet billions of dollars on things with no substance and not invest in actual solutions? I put IBM here because there's a phrase saying nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. IBM is one of the world's greatest companies. People who work with IBM, you might not say it's the best software ever, but if you go to your boss and said, I bought something from this startup and it didn't work, you might get fired. If you buy IBM, no one will blame you. So there's a real aversion to risk that keeps a lot of these ideas that can solve the problems moving forward. So that's where we stand. We have a bunch of great ideas. People don't have the risk tolerance to solve them. How can we as a society then make things better? How are we in a rising sun world rather than a setting sun world? Well, this is TEDxUVA. We couldn't go through here without talking about our friend Mr. Jefferson. And he had an idea about what we're talking about now when he built the lawn, when he built the academical village. He says, listen, the idea of learning, the idea of invention, the idea of progress, it doesn't happen in a house. He calls the lawn the academical village very deliberately. He says, you don't go and have a professor tell you this is what you do and then go do it. It's an exchange. It's a village. Ideas are flowing in and out. You learn as much, and if you go, I think I just turned that off. You learn as much from your neighbor who lives next to you, a student, as you do from a professor who lives to you on the other side. If you look up there, the idea of the lawn, for those of you not familiar with this, the big buildings are where professors live. The rooms in between are where students live. And there's this constant idea. You learn as much from your peer as you do from the, quote, expert. So this is not a new idea, this idea of peer learning, that we, instead of listening to the experts and the experts tell us what's risky and what's not, we can learn as much from you or you or you in terms of figuring out which ideas go forward. So this is the idea that we really want to talk about today, is peer review in driving new ideas. And like I said, this is not a new idea. It's just not really implemented in widespread ways. But if you look at some things that many of you are familiar with, this concept of peer review has been driving a lot of subsectors in society for a while. So academic journals, all based on peer review. If you want to publish a scientific article, you have to get other professors who know a lot about what you're doing to support it, not some expert judging committee who says we are experts on everything. You have to convince your peers, and there are very violent debates, but it yields really good stuff. I have a picture of a motel here. This is something that the immigrant communities in America have been doing for hundreds of years. If you are, say, in a Korean or an Indian or a African neighborhood in a big city, you come to town, you want to start a motel, people who are in the city, they will pool their resources, and these are your peers, people maybe from the same country, maybe from the same family even, deciding which of the new folks is going to get a loan from the group to start a new motel. This idea, how many of you have heard of microfinance? The microfinance is extending credit to hundreds of millions of people around the world who couldn't get a loan, and most every loan in the microfinance world is decided by groups of women picking which of their peers are ready to receive a loan. Bottom right, Village Capital, the organization I run, is taking this premise to the venture capital level, to these $50,000, $100,000 investments, and they're decided by peers rather than expert committees. Peer review is working around the world for two reasons, and it's a real way that we can get unstuck. Number one is it requires us to throw our hat over the wall. There's a story of John Kennedy told a story of his grandfather when he was coming from Ireland to the States. He was going through the countryside, he was an immigrant, and he came to a wall that seemed to be too high for him to get across. And he had his hat, which he carried with him. And he said that he and his companions threw their hats over the wall because they said, well, our hats are over there. We've got to find a way to get it. Now, if I point out any one of these startup companies to you, you can say that one's too risky, that one's too risky, that one's too risky. What ends up happening is if you don't throw your hat over the wall, you don't end up picking any of them because you can always find a reason to poke holes in anyone's argument. If you say in peer review, the way that these processes are structured, in microfinance, somebody will get a loan. In the academic journals, somebody will get published. And so then it becomes a discussion of not, are we going to do this or not, but which of these has the biggest chance of supporting? By pre-committing to the idea of innovation, you talk about what is the best innovation, not is this thing too risky or not. The second thing is there is an element of political cover or political risk when you're going to peer review that's completely removed. So, we're getting stuck in the budget in the U.S. Congress because neither party wants to own things that are unpopular. But if you're going to your group of peers and you're making decisions, it's made by a group, not by an individual, and everyone takes collective responsibility for the decision making. So you can't point fingers and say, he was wrong, I was right. And you're picking ideas that are generated from among your peers. So it's like if someone is decided, you can't really knock the decision. You can't say, well, they don't know what they're talking about or they don't really understand it. If I just fly in and make a decision in a day without ever really meeting you, I can be blamed. If you're someone who I know, if you're someone in my community, if you're someone who is doing what I'm very good at, you can't really get faulted. So as a very tangible reason or a very tangible example in public policy of how this happened, in the U.S., teacher performance standards have been a major, major issue. So teachers are, particularly in underperforming schools, not getting evaluated on how they're doing. City of Newark is one of the poorest school districts in the country, and they recently passed high teacher performance standards, which forever, teachers unions, political figures, everyone's resisted because they say, well, you guys can't come in here and tell us what we're doing. You don't know what a good teacher is, what a good teacher isn't. It's been a huge, huge problem in education. Newark solved it because they said, listen, we're going to be paying teachers better if they do better. We're going to be getting rid of teachers who aren't performing, but we're not going to have some expert panel fly into Newark and make a decision. It's going to be peer review. So if you are a City of Newark teacher, now your compensation and your chance for success are decided by your peers. And that that is a process innovation that got better and higher performance standards for teachers through in an area where people across the country have been stuck. So let's go back to our 4 innovators. They are people who, under the old system of we have ideas, you have money and power, let's go pitch you, and please help us, they were unsuccessful. They are now 4 companies that are very much on a path to success because they each got picked through their peers in peer selection processes. It's where they got their first round of seed capital, first round of resources to make it work. I think that there is a huge power dynamic between the people with ideas and the people with resources. And one idea worth spreading is if we flip that power dynamic and put the people with ideas in control of the resources and allocating them among their peers, I think we can shift from a setting sun to a rising sun. So thank you very much. Really enjoyed the time together.